Today is April 11th, 2011. My name is Tanya Finchum, along with Juliana Nicolation. We are with the Oklahoma State University Library and are conducting the Oklahoma Centennial Farm Families Oral History Project. Today we're in Red Rock, Oklahoma, visiting with the Bellmons about their Centennial Farm. So thank you for having us today, and let's start by having each one of you introduce yourself and say a few words.
I'm Hoerth. I'm the oldest, and I live here on the farm in the old farmhouse.
I'm Gail Wynne. I'm the middle, and I live in Enid.
I'm George Bellmon, and I'm owner, or past owner of Bellmon Farm. And I am 87 years old, and I reside at the Methodist Retirement Center, and known as the Commons in Enid, Oklahoma.
Well, thanks for coming today then.
And I'm McFerron. I am the youngest. I live on the farm in the what we call new farmhouse, even though it is 60 years old.
Well, thank you for having us today. Let's start by having, were you going to say this? Let's start by having someone tell how the Bellmons came to have the land to begin with. Way back.
As I know it, our father was a little bit too young to make the run. And he purchased a relinquishment, I think they called it, from a person that did stake the farm. And by doing that, he was able he purchased the farm, and a couple of years later built a home, and they've lived here. Just been in the family ever since.
When he came, George he lived in a dugout with his
Yes,
family
he did.
and worked for the original homesteaders, the people who staked the land. And they lost one or two children and decided to leave, and that's when he bought the relinquishment.
And where had they come from?
Kansas.
Ingram,
Yes.
Kansas.
Yes.
And this was the Cherokee outlet run of 1893.
And how many acres to begin with?
106.
And what crops did they start with? Do you remember?
Wheat. Yes. Wheat and cattle.
I think they tried corn too early on.
Corn and possibly cotton. I think they raised some cotton in those days here.
And what was the closest town?
Closest town was Billings. Yes.
Dad told a story one time about when they came by covered wagon, they brought chickens with them so that they would have eggs and have some meat in the winter. But when they got here and they had a dugout, they actually had the chickens right next to them, and he made it too warm for them, and they actually died, and so they didn't have the chickens for the winter. So.
Was it mostly just cleared land at that point? No trees or?
No, it was mostly trees. When you say cleared land, you mean cultivation, of course.
Right.
There wasn't much land in cultivation at that time.
But
They had to break it with a walking plow, and a team of horses. And that was pretty slow farming, But as time went on, there was a lot of changes. The equipment got bigger and mechanized. It's certainly a contrast from what it is today.
what was the original water source?
Water was a problem in certain areas, including this area. Getting water that was domestic, could be used for domestic purposes, was a problem. A lot of the wells the water wasn't fit, and a lot of people had to haul water. And as time went on, of course, probably 35 years ago, they started putting water districts through the country. we were able to get on a water district out of Marlin. The water comes from the Salt Fork River, wells drilled on near the Salt Fork River. And we've been using that for the last many years. It's proved to be very satisfactory, I think.
Are there any ponds on the, well, besides this one, I guess, any ponds on the property?
There are now.
Okay.
Of course, at that time, there wasn't any ponds, but now there's several ponds.
George, do you remember carrying water from the place over here?
Oh, you bet.
As kids, you all had to carry the water
We did.
from it. There's a windmill over there, and that was where the well was.
Yes. There was a good well there. That water was pretty good. We had to haul it. We lived about half a mile west of the well she's talking about.
Yeah, they tried to drill some wells and they couldn't find wells on your property, could they?
If they found them, the water wasn't fit for use.
So how many brothers and sisters did you have?
I had three full brothers. Then we had half brothers and half sisters. Our father's first wife died in about 18 or 19, and he had 7 daughters and 2 sons by his first family. And the second family, which we were a part, there was 4 boys. A total of 13.
So describe the house that you lived in.
The first family had left by the time we came along, so we weren't all in the same house at the same time.
Well, how was it heated, the house?
With a wood stove, we burned wood.
And did you have some chores that you were responsible for?
Oh, yes. We had quite a lot of chores. We milked, from 12 to 15 cows year round, and we had to take care of them, but we milked twice a day, and we had chickens, and we had gardens, and we had to cut a lot of wood for the winter, and there was lots to do. And we used horses to farm with. This entailed a lot of work.
And did your mother have a large garden?
We had a garden, a large garden. Potatoes, vegetables. We had an orchard, apples, peaches.
And besides the farmhouse, what other buildings were there on the property?
Well, we had a garage, and we had a granary, and we had 2 different barns that we used to milk cows.
Do you have chicken houses?
Yes, we did. We had at least 2 chicken houses.
And a smokehouse, did you?
We had a smokehouse. Yes.
And I'm assuming an outdoor toilet?
Oh yes. Oh yes.
Of those buildings, are any of them still standing?
Oh, I'm going. Just the home. The rest of the buildings are gone.
Is the chicken house north of the old house not original?
No.
The one that's there
One of the chicken houses burned down.
Yeah, the breeder house.
That was years later.
Well, how far would you have to go to school?
A mile and a quarter north.
And how would you get there?
We'd walk. There wasn't much traffic on these country roads in those days. And we walked. And, it wasn't bad in the wintertime. We faced the north wind going to school. And we had a tailwind coming home. That helped. But the one room school north of a mile and a quarter north was named Glenrose. And when we were in grade school there was as many as 31 one school in that one room school office. Each class would go to the front of the room, and they had a bench, and we'd sit on the bench, while the teacher taught our class. And the next class would come up. It was quite different.
Grades 1 through
8.
And then where would you go from there after the 8th grade?
Well, we went to Billings High School. Rode a bus, and the school district was pretty large because we rode the bus. Seemed like a lot of miles getting to and from school.
Well, did your father only farm, or did he have other sources of income?
He farmed, but in the very early 20s, they had an oil. The East Billings oil field included some of the land that we farmed, and he had a lot of horses, and he did a lot of work for the oil companies. In those days, they didn't have the equipment. They didn't have the bulldozers and the backhoes, and track hoes, and all that. All the work was done with horses. And he was quite active in that regard.
And then your mother was a school teacher.
Yes.
Did he have to have hired help around the farm?
Yes. Not too much, but we did have a little help.
And did he participate in the rings that would go from farm to farm, like the combine, or
Did he participate in one?
in the rings, like the combine harvesting rings when they go from farm to farm and cut the wheat?
The threshing crew.
Thrashing crews?
Oh, we didn't have a thrashing machine. In those days, there were a few thrash machines in the country, and they would move from one farm to the other and thrash the wheat and the oats or barley, whatever. They were powered in the early days by steam engines, which were large and very slow moving, but that was the source of power for these thrash machines. Quite different. Later on, of course, we got combines. The first combines they weren't self-propelled by far. They were pulled by either horses or tractors, and that's what we used for ever since. And now we've got, as you know, self-propelled combines that are much larger, much more efficient.
And some of them have air conditioning, I hear.
Oh yes, oh yes,
Makes a difference.
they're quite modern, very comfortable, quiet. It's quite a difference.
Well, in the 30s, did they do anything with the WPA, with soil conservation or anything like that?
Oh, the WPA wasn't active in this area that I know of, and particularly in soil conservation. They might have had projects maybe that I don't know about. But generally speaking, I don't think they were, not here.
Didn't need to do terracing on the property?
Oh yes, I can tell you that when we came back here from World War II, there was hardly any terraces in the country. I don't hardly know of any. And my brother and I were able to. We bought a couple of used Caterpillar dozers. We bought them from what they called the War Assets Administration. It was Army surplus. And we used those, and we did a lot of terracing. We built a lot of ponds in this area. And there's been many ponds built since then. The government assisted in paying for the terraces and the waterways and the ponds. And they did a lot, but you can't believe the difference now and what it was then. We came back here in 45 and 46 from the war. And it wasn't unusual to start around a wheat field. And you'd come to a ditch that was so big you couldn't cross it. You'd have to turn and go up that ditch until you could find a place where you could cross. Erosion, you know. And it wouldn't be unreasonable to come to another ditch that you couldn't cross, and you'd have to go up and go around it, which slowed the farming operation up considerably. And now we don't have that. The land is terraced, and we don't have the erosion that we did then.
And which brother was this?
That was my older brother Henry.
So from the 40s, and it's moving into the 50s. What's going on in the 50s?
Well, much of the same in the 50s. There was an awful lot of work went on in the fields in those days. There's been a lot of improvement, very much.
And the three of you came on in the 50s, I'm assuming. So what do you, one of you want to tell a little bit about your experiences, early days on the farm?
We helped out with sheep and chickens. We would help with shearing. We were the ones who were in the bottom of these giant gunny sacks that were hung from the ceiling of the barn, and they would put us in it and they'd throw the fleeces in, and we'd stomp them down all day. It was usually a day or two of shearing. And we brought the sheep in at night. They'd follow. We'd walk out to the field, the pasture, and they'd follow us in. And then we helped with the chickens, which they had a lot of chickens, like 1,200 chickens, I think is the figure I remember. And we had to gather the eggs and candle them, and then grade them, and then my mom would drive them to Enid to different places where she had arranged to sell them.
Dad also drove him, because I was a preschool at the time, and I would ride with him, and he would sing songs about Mom as we drove to Enid, delivered the eggs to the hospitals and nursing facilities.
Songs about your mother?
He had some real funny songs about Mom that he would sing.
You want to sing one?
I don't remember them exactly.
But he would buy her candy, and Pat and I were in school, and she would come home and sell it to us.
And not
And-
love it.
Not much, yeah. Anne was not in school yet. She was pretty savvy early on. The job I remember the most from the 50s has to do with this house. I mean, I loved going into the field every night and bringing the sheep home, and even like gathering eggs. But this house, which was built in 1960, is built out of the bricks from the movie theater in Billings that burned in the late 1950s. And Mother and Daddy bought those bricks, and we cleaned every brick. They dumped them at the what we call the old house, and we spent a summer cleaning the old mortar off the bricks so that it could be used for this. No child would come and play with us that summer. We were all alone. No, we did have some friends that come, but that's one big project I remember from the early 60s, actually.
Just brought them truckload by truckload, or?
Just dumped them
They dumped-
mountains.
They brought him just at one time.
Oh.
The post office and the buildings, yeah.
Did you get an allowance for doing that?
No, we got a new house.
Well, we did get a little money every Saturday. We were taken to the McClellan, what was it called? Like a little
Dime
store, dime store
Oh,
in Perry,
that's
and we were allowed to. So we had some little money to buy something with on Saturdays.
And then after harvest every year, we got, there'd always be rain during harvest, and it would always leave wet spots that the custom cutters couldn't cut. So Daddy would go back in, and when they'd ride up, and we would get the money from that wheat, from whatever wet spots there'd been that year. And they'd take us to Enid. I remember one year they thought we'd all buy bicycles, and we got suitcases instead. We intended to travel just by different means. I can't remember the name of the store in Enid.
Oh, yeah.
But, so we did have a little income.
Were y'all in 4-H or?
Yes.
We have the record books to prove it.
different projects or the same sheep?
We really didn't do animals much in 4-H. I did the horse. I was in the horse part of 4-H and did a little bit with horses, but mostly we did the dress review and the canning and the fair and the books and the demonstrations.
The poultry cake and egg show. I think they
Talent show,
The wool.
trips to Europe
people to people trips to Europe.
with, what was his name? Byron.
And we did the summer camps. We always went to 4-H camp, and our mom was she was one of the 4-H leaders, and so she was always at camp, and
She would cook.
And back to the chicken house thing. The other thing when we gathered eggs, the one thing, Mom got the taller ones because we were too small. But those are the ones that you reached in and you couldn't see, and sometimes you'd get a snake instead of an egg. So that was always something that you'd know when she screamed that she found
She
something
had a
she didn't want.
One of the best stories from this farm actually is from their generation. And it may just be family lore, but here's how I remember it. You can correct me. Being told there were 4 boys born in like 5 or 6 years, so they were pretty close together. That house has a really steep staircase that basically must have originally been had a closet door on it. So it has a big header at right above the door to go up the stairs. And the boys would take turns moving up the stairs and jumping to the bottom to see who could get the furthest up and land at the bottom. And Daddy, being the oldest of those boys, I guess, went first, and so he ended up the highest up, and he jumped off the top steps, and on the way down hit his head on the header, which knocked him cold, and the cat walked by at a most inopportune moment, and he landed on the cat. So he has blood running out of his head, and there's cat guts everywhere, and of course you can imagine what your mother thought. Is that accurate, George?
Yes, it is.
It has been embellished along the years. You remember that day?
I certainly do. I certainly do.
How old were you?
Gosh, I don't know. We probably, I'd say 8, something like that. When we went to grade school, it was during the Depression. And I don't recall ever having heard the term depression used, but things are so different. We had plenty to eat. We didn't suffer, and we didn't know any better. We thought everything was normal, but we had to provide our own entertainment. I don't remember the first movie I ever seen, but I was well along, probably in high school. But I remember one thing that we did for entertainment that happened about every Sunday afternoon during the summer. The boys from the whole community, which is a pretty large area, would get together in somebody's cow pasture on Sunday afternoon, and we'd play baseball. We didn't have a backstop. We had a pigtail. He was the boy that stood behind the pitcher and run down all the foul balls and missed pitches, But this was something that we looked forward to every day. Our mother was very religious, and this bothered her because it was the Lord's Day, and there wasn't supposed to be anything that went on. And she didn't want to deprive us of that entertainment, but it bothered her pretty much. I could tell that. But we would get together on Sunday afternoon. We'd either have to walk or ride a horse to get where we wanted to go. But maybe somebody would get the family sedan and drive, but not too many did that. But it was quite different. And we spent a lot of time trying to raise a little money. We scoured the area trying to pick up junk, scrap iron, or whatever we could do. We might gather the eggs and go to the country store up here and buy a Coke or something. But it's quite a contrast from what it is today, I can tell you that. And there was nothing open on Sunday. Nothing. You might find a filling station someplace, but you'd have to look for one. And going to say something. But anyway, and in those days, hardly anybody worked on Sunday. They just didn't do it.
And that was true when we were growing up too.
I know.
It continued.
But when you contrast that with today, you see.
The other thing, Dad talked about his mom a lot, and she was a really great cook. And he talked about they would take their lunch to school every day, but she always fixed big lunches. And he said the other kids would tease him about his lunches because they were always, and she made great pies and really good food for your lunches.
And he told us that she could time the cinnamon rolls coming out of the oven when they arrived home from school, so they had warm cinnamon rolls.
And we never knew her. She died while they were both. Were you home yet from the
No.
war? They were both
Overseas.
overseas during the war.
George, do you remember music evenings with?
Pardon?
Do you remember musical evenings with neighbors when everybody would get together with instruments and play music?
Oh, some, but not a whole lot. My mother played the piano, and we used to sing some in the evenings, you know, and that sort of thing. But I can't remember too many people coming in for that.
Well, do you remember when electricity came?
Oh yes, very much, very. I remember very well. That was quite a fine improvement. If you've ever tried to study, and we probably didn't do a lot of study, but a coal oil lamp doesn't give you adequate illumination, obviously. I do remember. I was in high school at the time, and it must have been about 1939 or 40 when we got electricity.
George, could you tell her about Irwin?
We had a brother that was between Henry and I. His name was Irvin, and he graduated in 1940. And we were helping a neighbor right south of us harvest his oats. And they had a thrash machine in there, and it was powered with one of these steam engines, and they had horses and hay racks. They hauled the bundles in and pitched them in this thrash machine. But anyway, during the afternoon, it came up an electrical storm, a thunderstorm, pretty severe. And our brother was standing in a barn where they had hauled a load of oats. They had scooped it in a bin there, and he and a couple other men were standing in the driveway of this barn, and the lightning struck and hit him pretty directly and killed him. And that was quite a calamity in the family at that time. But
He was scheduled to go to OSU that fall. Right?
yes, he was.
He was he the youngest or
Was
Randall
the
was the youngest?
He was next to the oldest.
Okay, he was next to Dad.
So, and then Randall, and then you're the youngest, aren't you? Or
No.
it was Randall? Randall's the youngest.
Is that barn still standing?
No.
It wasn't on this property, it was the neighbor's.
That's right. So when did the ownership, well, it really hasn't changed, but once your family had it and then Henry got it, or was there some, how did that work?
Yes, Henry got it. Actually, my father gave our younger brother, he wasn't interested in farming. They gave him some money. I don't know how much, wasn't very much, but he gave the home place to Henry and I. And later on, oh God, I don't remember when, but later on he bought me out. And I went to North Carolina and bought a farm out there. I had been stationed there during the Korean War and got interested in the country out there and liked it. And after I got out of the service, I went back there and bought a farm. And Henry ended up with a home place.
And is it still 160 acres
Yes.
now, or
Well,
There's
plus
more.
plus some, I guess, but the original 160 is still,
yes.
And Pat is the owner of it now.
okay.
Henry accumulated more land and bought land in the area. So he had a pretty good farming operation.
And then at what point did you come back?
I came back in '65. He, as you know, had got involved in politics and got himself elected governor, and he wanted me to come back and manage the farm. And it wasn't an easy move for me. I liked North Carolina, I really did. But I did come back and manage the farm. And a few years later, I went on my own and I've accumulated land. I had my own farm operation.
Well, when you were managing the farm, you were still raising wheat primarily?
Yes. Primarily wheat and cattle.
And when your father was in the governor's mansion, did you come back and forth? Or stay down there most of the time, or?
We came back most weekends. We didn't like coming back every weekend once we got in high school. But
We were teenagers. We made new friends. But we came back to church in Perry and came here quite a lot of the time.
This was always home.
This was always their home base, no matter where they ended up.
Well, what is so special about it, you think, that has kept y'all wanting to keep it in the family, and anything in particular you can put your...
Oh, we love the wind and we love the extreme temperatures.
Okay.
It's just lovely.
It is lovely. I wish people would quit disparaging the weather. We have more good days than bad.
Well, I know it's home, but is there...
Just walking the prairie, just being, actually I lived in Maryland for 20 years and Maryland is full of trees. And when I would come back and just driving from the city or driving in, to be able to see a distance, and to see the sunrise and the sunset, and there's a beauty to the prairie that if you haven't experienced it, you just maybe don't understand what a beauty it is. But it's really special, and even as kids, we love to walk, and and I always love the animals and the nature, so it's a special place to us.
We had a eclectic, I guess you'd call it, childhood really here, because I was 12 when we moved to Oklahoma City, and we were there for 4 years, and then came back here, and I graduated from high school, and then her daddy moved to Washington, and Ann ended up, we all three graduated from different high schools, but we were very deeply rooted here, and in our young years, Ann was 11, or 10 when we moved to Oklahoma City, so the first 10 to 15 years of our lives, we were pretty much putting down roots here. But then we began to see more of the world, and so we had a wonderful mix that I think has allowed us to make really good choices about coming back. And I'm the only one who doesn't live here now, but I live close by. So it wasn't that we never left, but it wasn't that we ever totally left either. So I think it's just been a good mix of being able to pull on the strengths that they gave us. We hit the jackpot in the gene pool of parenting, in my opinion, and got to see a lot of the world. And I think that gave us gave me, I can't speak for them, an assurance of where I wanted to be.
I think there's a sense of responsibility for the land. I know that came from Mom and Dad, and that because after the Depression and the changing of the way they farmed, that was a huge lesson learned, and still there are lessons being learned, and it's kind of our turn to make sure that the land is taken care of in the very best way. I think that's a real pull. We're willing to withstand the weather and certainly deeply care about the unique beauty here, but I think there is a sense of responsibility that keeps us rooted.
Well, what were some of the holidays like in the early, like when you were before you were 12, 13, before you went to the Capitol? What were some of the holidays like? I guess we could start with George. What was holidays like when you were a youngster?
You know, holidays, to me, I just have never appreciated them. I just don't. I know that's negative, but that's the way it is. And the reason, one reason, I don't know how many times I've been working on the farm, in the field, and maybe you'd have a breakdown. And maybe it would be Friday at 3 o'clock. And you would go to the dealer to get a part, and he had to order it. And it was Friday, and it was too late to order it there. Next day, Saturday, and then Sunday. And then the holidays always on Monday, which meant you had about 5 days, or 4 at least, before you could get what you needed. And it seemed like invariably that would happen. You'd break down and have to deal with a holiday. Now, and I never did get used to that. But I just don't care for holidays.
But I can answer that question a little bit because my dad once wrote me a letter about Christmas trees. Mother was allergic. We always cut red cedar trees, and there was a difference in proportion in the great outdoors and in the house. So we always ended up with this humongous tree that would hardly fit through any door, and I'm sure many families in this part of the country did the same thing. So Mother developed an allergy to them, and I insisted that they get, at some point, an artificial tree. And I got a very pointed letter about Christmas. I wish I had it. I will get it to you. About an artificial Christmas tree. And in that letter, he talked about what your mother did at Christmas, which was usually just a branch of a cedar tree. And that she would cut, he described it as papers, dolls, holding hands, a connection of paper dolls, not the link, the cardboard or the construction paper link, but paper dolls and strung popcorn. And that would be your Christmas tree, not a full-blown tree. And I think he made up for it later on because we had the biggest trees you can imagine. And even when we lived in Oklahoma City, he'd cut a cedar tree and take it down to the mansion. And we all know what happens to a cedar tree after about 3 days. They get prickly.
But back then, there weren't cedar trees everywhere. So
That's true.
one of the things he taught us was that when you cut a tree, you would leave a branch to make sure that you didn't kill the tree, and so that the trees would come back. Of course, nowadays, if you were to cut a cedar, you'd cut the whole thing and forget about the branch. But at the time, that was real important for him to conserve the tree and save it for the future.
But we celebrated mostly with the mother's side of the family, either at our grandmother's house or here. And there were 10 grandchildren on the Osborne side. And that's who we pretty much spent our Christmases with.
And how close was that to this house?
6 miles?
Also?
6, 7 miles. South and east.
we would,
South and west.
and Memorial Day was the week. That was the holiday we would spend with Dad's side of the family. That they would all come. They were a very big family with all these step kids, and also it was a very large family.
Daddy's mother, their mother's family was very musical. How many Caskey children were there?
Well,
8 or 9?
oh, there's probably 7. Oh, wait a minute. Count the girls too.
Yeah, let's count the girls too.
I was thinking about the musician.
Oh,
Right.
But there were 4 boys, 4 of George's uncles, who were a gospel quartet and who traveled with the Lyceum Circuit of the Red Path Chautauqua all over the country with a set of Deegan shaker chimes that are 11 feet by 12 feet, and they collapsed them into the little carriage thing. And they went all over the country and played chimes and sang.
And brass, they had a brass.
And they had brass. So it was a musical family. And I can remember them standing in this living room, those four, my great uncles, singing harmony to great old hymns and patriotic songs. And beautiful, their voices blended so beautifully.
And those chimes are still, Gail has the chimes over in the church in
They're-
it. They're
they're-
still.
The Presbyterian Church in Enid. And they were played yesterday. They played them pretty frequently.
And there are not very many sets surviving. It's a really unique instrument.
And it was Purdue has a set that's about a third or 2/3 of our set. But our uncles were really tall and there were 4 of them, so they ordered the biggest set. It was from a company called Deacon out of Chicago. And they ordered the biggest set they could make. And they came about 1905 or 6, I think.
And they just happened to want to do that, or
Or somebody wanted them
story
to.
behind that.
I don't really know. I have to reread the book to
I
find
heard
out.
the chimes were made for them because they were big. But do you know anything about the story of the chimes?
Oh, not really. I've heard it, but I can't recall it.
It's written in Edith Peace's book about the Caskey family, so we'll have to dig it out and look it up.
We've at different times tried to contact the Deacon Company, and
They don't exist.
but there's not a lot of information here on the internet. In fact, once in a while you'll get a clue. I heard of one in New York, and I know Disney has small shaker chimes, but other than
There's a
Purdue,
man
we
in
haven't
Connecticut
found.
in a church who won't talk. I found him, but he doesn't want anybody to know he has them, so he won't talk much about them. And then the set at Purdue,
Yes,
and they're played on a regular basis at Purdue.
at their Christmas concert.
Interesting tidbit there.
Mm-hmm. And that was the Caskey side of the family. But I always think of them when you say Memorial Day. I thought of all the uncles.
And these chimes were so big that they wouldn't fit in most houses. You have to. So actually, our Aunt Beth, she had them for several years in her house in a bedroom, but she couldn't put the tallest ones up because they wouldn't fit. And so we would go to her house, and you know, the uncles lived in different states, so when they get together, it was such a treat to get to hear them sing and to play these chimes. They were just phenomenal.
Any recordings you think are around somewhere?
I have a recording of my Aunt Beth and Uncle Joe playing them, but I don't know if there are other. Our Uncle Randall originally owned them, and in his generation, and they played them in Yukon in different places. So there may be some recordings of. There were 3 women that played them in Yukon, and then we bought them from Joyce, his widow, probably 5 or 6 years ago.
But as far as recordings of the actual brothers playing them, no.
Well, this question's for Juliana. She usually likes to ask, since there's chickens involved, did you all have methods, specific methods for wringing their necks, or how would you?
You know, it's funny that you should say that because we were just talking about this yesterday. Our dad didn't like to eat chicken, and he didn't even like. So I don't remember.
He sold them off the farm alive. They would come in a huge truck and put them in like wooden cages and send them off.
So we didn't kill chicken.
I remember Grandma, mother's mother, wringing chicken's neck, but I don't know how she did it. But I don't ever remember. We ate a lot of lamb and a lot of beef, but I don't remember much.
It's interesting
But-
because he really didn't kill them. Mom didn't kill us.
The turkeys,
That's who he's calling.
turkeys were
Okay, it's who-
different. We were all ready to kill the turkeys, but we had turkeys for I don't know how long. We were pretty little, and Daddy's. We don't know whether this was intentional or just happened, but he managed to put where we burned the trash on the other side, of the house, and the turkey pen. So it was house, turkeys, trash, and there are home movies of Mother
short shorts.
in her short shorts trying to get the trash taken out and coming back through the turkey pen with the empty trash can, just move out of my way. She wasn't hitting them hard, but just clearing her path because turkeys are pretty aggressive. And,
Oh, heck yeah.
they weren't our favorite and they didn't last very long.
And
We
they're-
tried about everything on this.
And they're not smart. If you would happen to set a 5-gallon bucket in the turkey pen, one turkey would jump in and the others, out of curiosity, would jump, and you would end up pulling, 10 dead turkeys out of this 5-gallon bucket because they would just keep piling on top of each other. And if you should happen to drive the tractor in there and leave the keys in the ignition, when you would go back, they would have taken the keys and swallowed them and had no keys.
We had all sorts of turkey problems.
Yeah.
I take it something like that happened.
Yeah, that's how we know. So yeah, now the day we actually have movies of the day we sold the turkeys. I'm not even sure why they own turkeys. We didn't kill them either.
Well,
But
they, for, to sell as a crop, but,
when I went back, this was not really a 4-H project, but as a kid I had my piggy bank and I saved my money and went with Dad to the auction one day. I was like 5 years old to buy a pig. And so it came time for me to bid on this pig, and I started bidding, and the other farmers realized they were bidding against a 5-year-old, and so they stopped bidding, but I knew how much money I had, so I just kept bidding until I spent all my money. So I was actually bidding against myself, and Dad didn't stop me, I don't know why, but I brought home a pig that then had little ones, and then I made my money back, but that was my adventure into pigs. And another pig story was we had a mouse or rat issue in the pig pen, and so Dad would go out at night with at least he did it once, with a gun with a scope on it, and he would lay on his belly, and I had a flashlight on it, and the flashlight would shine, and when he did that and he started shooting, the rats got scared and came right out at him and went down his bib overalls. I don't think he tried that anymore. I think once was sufficient for that.
I remember that night him coming in the house. Pretty awful.
Well, that reminds me of another incident with bees. They had bees back then. And Mom and Dad, this was before us, Mom and Dad were first married, and they had gotten the honey out of the hives with the comb, and they brought it in and put it on the stove, and Mom left, and Dad was in charge of watching the honey on the stove, and he fell asleep. So it boiled over. Their brand new stove ended up with all this honey, and it was years later they were still getting honey out of that stove. So.
They were married in 47, January of 47. And at that time, at the old house, there was no running water. And my grandfather, Bellmon, was living with them when they were first married. And Pat came along shortly thereafter, and like 14 months, and then she had polio. And so it was a pretty difficult life, I think, especially for Mother very early on.
Well, and the night I was born was a horrible blizzard. And Dad and our mother's father, it was lambing season, so they came back from Enid, from the hospital, and got stranded and had to walk about 5 miles in waist-high snow. And our grandfather actually was living, our grandfather Bellmon was living about a mile east of here. And he got so cold, he stoked his stove heavily, and the chimney got too hot, and the house caught fire and burned down that night. The neighbors across the way, about a quarter of a mile away, took him in. It was a very
It
traumatic.
was March 11th,
Yeah, it was
which is now a famous.
1948.
1948.
Did you have something else you wanted to say, George? Did you have something else you wanted to tell a minute ago?
I think we have to record how Mother and Daddy's long courtship as part of this. Daddy was 6 years older than Mother, and he skipped a couple of years of school. So even though they grew up 6 miles apart, they didn't really know each other growing up. And after the war, he came home, and on a Sunday, coming home from church, he had a flat tire. And Mother stopped to help him fix the flat tire. And he asked her out for that night, and she said no, because she was too excited to go home and tell her mother that he had asked her out. So he asked her out again, and by Wednesday, they were engaged. And 5.5 weeks later, they were married. And they were married for 53, 54 years until Mother died. So they knew what was right from the beginning. And I've heard a lot of early post-World War II stories of 10-day romances or like that.
Where did they get married? Where?
Married in Billings,
Methodist.
at the Methodist Church.
Well, we've had them talk about chickens. Did you have to kill chickens when you were younger?
Yes. I can remember that when they wringed their necks. It wasn't easy, but they could do it. A lot of women could do it, of course. I prefer to put your neck across the chopping block and take an axe. It was much more humane, I think.
George, do you remember skunk hunting?
Pardon?
Do you remember trapping skunks?
Oh, yes, you bet. We trapped skunks and possums, and coons, and whatever.
Did you eat them?
Oh, no. We could sell the pelts and maybe get $1.50 for them, but that was pretty good money.
Do you remember wearing skunk?
Pardon?
Do you remember wearing skunk stuff around your neck?
Yes.
What was that for?
Well, our father, he had a lot of home cures that we used in those days. One of them was if you got a cold or had a sore throat, we'd trap a skunk and kill it and skin it, we'd end up with some lard, or grease. We'd render that, get it in an oil form, and he would take a sock or a cloth or something and soak it in that and wring it out and put it around your neck. And that was a cure for colds and sore throats and whatever.
Did it work?
Well, it must have, I guess.
How bad did it smell?
Pardon?
How bad did it smell?
No, you didn't have the skunk odor. It smelled, but not
Not
like
like a
that.
skunk.
But we had a medicine we used in those days, and they called it cascara evacuant. The most terrible tasting stuff you've ever. I haven't heard of it since. I don't know what happened to it, but
It became Cree
I was gonna
emulsion
say-
in the 50s.
it became one.
Cree emulsion in
Really?
the 50s was the
Really?
really
I don't
horrible
know if it's
tasting.
the same, but it was a terrible tasting medicine that,
Yeah, nobody coughed at our house because
Yeah.
one cough and you had to take it.
Well, one go around with that, and you didn't get sick anymore. I mean,
You were a healthy crew.
you bet. You stayed that way. Yeah.
Did they do anything particular if you got bee stung?
Did you what?
If you got bee stung, did they have a remedy for that?
I don't recall if they did. No. I don't think they have one yet, do they, or not?
Well, my dad had a few.
Did he?
Tobacco juice
oh,
for one.
Oh, really?
You were a tobacco farmer, you should know
And a few others we won't go into.
that. Baking soda paste works pretty good.
Do you go barefoot too much out here, I guess? Yes, no?
we went I went barefoot as a kid.
There were sandburrs, but
Yeah, I used to like to get animals, they could possibly be dead or alive or whatever, but like dead skunks, and then I would chase my sisters. I would run, chase them around the yard with the dead skunk or maybe a snake or, I was bringing home critters all the time, lizards and just anything I could find came
and
into the
when
house.
she would chase us, instead of mother correcting her unladylike behavior, mother would get the movie camera and take pictures. So we have movies of Anne chasing Pat and I with the skunk.
But we used to hunt quite a bit, and in those days there wasn't near as many ducks and geese as there are now. There just weren't, and you really had to do some hunting a lot of times to come up with any game. But I remember one time there wasn't many ponds in the early days. There just wasn't. The oil companies might have built one, or very few. But anyway, we would walk from one pond to the other. And sometimes we'd be gone a big part of the day and we'd get hungry. And if we hadn't killed any ducks, why, we had to provide something else. And I remember one time we didn't have any ducks or nothing to eat. We got pretty hungry. We shot about 4 meadowlarks and cleaned them and ate those meadowlarks. Have you ever heard of anybody eating meadowlarks? I hadn't either.
Did you cook them?
Yes. Well, we cooked them over an open fire,
Well, they must have been
Huh?
little.
They were pretty small, but by golly,
They were tasty.
I don't remember what they tasted like, but they were probably as good as quail, I suppose.
Probably.
Maybe not, but
Did you fish? Oh, there weren't any ponds to fish.
well, there wasn't too many. No, there really wasn't. We wanted fish, we'd get them out of the creek. Usually. It seemed like there was water in the creeks more in those days than there is now for some reason. I don't know why. used to get a lot of catfish out of the creek.
What other things would you do for fun besides your baseball games on Sunday? What else?
Oh, golly, I can't think of much.
What about you girls? It wasn't all work.
Our Sunday afternoons, we would go to church in Perry, and we always ate lunch in Perry with the same two families, and then we would come back and often drive around the farm, go check, just check out the wheat, check out the cattle. We always, Sunday drives, and we would come home and sleep, take a nap. There were always Sundays were a real relaxed day.
Or is there also time to go visit neighbors? Go visit people on Sunday?
But during the week, we pretty much just played with ourselves, with each other. We had, as we got a little older, we'd have friends come home from school. But, we just played outside, just all the time.
Well, our cats got snap beads and dresses,
And we harassed the hired man pretty badly from time to time. When they'd say, it's hot enough to fry an egg, we'd go put one on his tractor seat and make sure that it was hot enough to fry an egg. And there wasn't a lot of concrete around, so what else got that hot? So we were, Anne was really mischievous, actually.
I can remember, I don't remember, we were in grade school, probably in the later years. We got our first bicycle, and we were coming back from a swimming trip or something, walking. We were west of the house, probably a quarter of a mile on this road down here. And I saw something glisten, the sun reflecting something. They were unloading it out of the car, and it was a new bicycle. Now that was a big day. And of course we started running, and we got home pretty quick. But we rode that bicycle. We would take turnabout riding that bicycle out to the mailbox and back. And we rode that thing till way after dark, back to the mailbox. That was quite a prized possession for poor boys in grade school.
None of us rode a bike as children, because the three of us, because they were building I-35 when they finished it in the early 60s. And all the construction, the big trucks came up and down this section line. It was the first full, easy to get through section line. And Mother and Daddy didn't want us to have bicycles because of all the trucks.
Actually, I did.
Did you have one?
Cecil.
Well, you're so much older.
Yeah, Cecil from the Osborne side of the family. Goldsmith taught me how to ride a bike from the house up to the north corner, just a quarter mile. On the dirt, on the gravel. It was not an easy place to learn to ride. Yeah.
We didn't get.
Tell them about our swimming.
Yeah, this is kind of horrifying, but in the summer there is a pond just south of the house, less than a quarter of a mile out in the pasture. And Mom would put us in bright orange life jackets and give us an alarm clock with the time set. And we would walk to the pond with the alarm clock set, and when the alarm clock went off, we were supposed to get out of the pond and come home.
No
Mom
adult.
didn't go with us, just the three of us in our life jackets, and we never took them off. And we'd swim when the alarm went off, we came
And I have absolutely no memory.
And how old were we?
We were in grade school.
Isn't that amazing?
She'd probably go to jail.
And there were no car seats either. There weren't even seat belts. But one of my vivid memories, for some reason, of things outside growing up was when a pond would dry up or a creek bed, and there would be these big, thick pieces of clay that would be so dry that they would curve up on the ends. And we just played with it. I don't know what we did with them, but I just remember at Grandma's house and here, there must have been a drought during that spell of time that we just built things with them, and it's pretty basic.
Also, this pond, this would have been probably in the 60s.
In high school.
Or so. Got a lot of carp and things in it, or maybe not even that.
It was carp.
but they decided to road know the pond, which means they could take the oxygen out of the water. And so and that affects, of course, all the fish, not just the fish you want to get rid of. So we had basically the town of Billings, and it seemed like almost, I just remember all these steps totally were covered with fish, because as the fish come up, you literally just grab them and put them in the boat or whatever, and then you bring them up. And we had a huge fish fry of all of these catfish and everything, and had at least, a huge part of the town come out and enjoy the fish. So.
And we used to water ski on this pond with friends. And when it would freeze in the wintertime, people would come out and skate. We'd have bonfires and all sorts of
Hot chocolate and marshmallow.
yeah.
Well, the power went off in Billings one time, so people just headed out here, and we had a great. And they even took benches. I mean, this is how thick the ice was. They took benches, and the men would run. We have movies of it, and slide on those benches on the ice. Seems like a scary thing to do.
Yeah,
Well,
outdoors entertaining. I mean, we entertained ourselves with the out.
And at that time, there was a lot more snow in the winter because they would put snow fences up on Highway 15, like you see in Colorado now. But and I'm sure during your youth there were a lot of snow fences around to keep the snow off the roads.
There was a lot more, seemed like a lot more snow in those days. We used to try to ice skate on the creeks, and then the only ice skates we had were the kind that clamped on your soles, and they weren't satisfactory. And none of us, I don't think, ever learned to ice skate.
Probably wasn't real smooth ice
No.
either.
Yeah, I remember not even having ice skates, but the water would freeze and be really bumpy. But you would put like 6 layers of clothes on and just go out and play on the ice.
We didn't have a television for a long time, can you tell? We only got a television when my great-grandfather Osborne died, and we were the only people in the family that didn't have one, so they gave us his. And this would have been,
We were all in school.
yeah, this would have been like 1960 or pretty close.
It was just by choice, your parents' choice.
Yeah.
So it's not-
Mhm. So we spent a lot of time outside entertaining ourselves. And music, we all took music. A lot of
Some more
music.
successfully than others.
Yeah, we all took lots of music lessons.
Were there some outside chores and inside chores? How were those divided amongst, or were they?
Well, our parents then, getting in politics, did a lot of entertaining here, and I always remember us the big 3-pane window, washing the windows, and we used this glass wax stuff that was this pink stuff, and so that was a big chore, and we would get kind of rowdy, and so mothers would say, "You girls settle down," and we'd squinch down on the ground. We gave our mom a hard time.
I don't remember any sort of system.
The chicken, we all did the chicken egg gathering and the kindling. We all did that. We all I remember all of us at different times going to bring the sheep in. Cooking
Doing dishes.
We did a lot of cooking because those days you fed the harvest crew. So we all cooked. I guess I know I could did.
Well, my memory of the routine was that you'd fix a big noon meal like fried chicken and mashed potatoes and take that to the field, and we'd come home and clean that up. And then at 4 o'clock, we would go back out with sandwiches, and everybody got a little homemade pie.
Fried pie.
No, they were baked. I've got the tins.
Yeah, they were regular.
I remember the folded over and fried.
Oh, we must have done both. But I mean, so we worked a lot especially during harvest in the kitchen.
And they both drove wheat trucks. And
Some more successfully than others.
But I was too young, so I always did the cooking after they stopped cooking, I continued. I never got, I didn't drive a wheat truck till in my 50s.
Do you remember the night I backed it into yeah, I remember that night.
It was a storm.
It was a storm. And
over here on the corner.
Daddy had told me, don't go up that because the bridge is out, and I got a couple 100 feet up the road and remember the bridge was out, so I tried to back up a full load of wheat in a storm up to get to the intersection to go into town, and my back wheel dropped into the ditch, and we lost some wheat that night. You weren't real happy, as I recall. Pat was mad at you because you were more concerned about the wheat than me.
Well, George, do you remember your first tractor?
Oh, yes, absolutely. I do. It was I don't remember what year it was, but we bought it, I remember it, bought it from a neighbor that lived up the road a few miles. It was an Alice Chalmers, I think they called it a Model U, and it had lugs, no rubber tires, just steel wheels. Which the early tractors all, of course, had steel wheels. But this was quite a day to have a tractor. My father never did learn how to drive a car. He would drive it, but he never learned how to. And I look back and I can understand. When I compare his dealings with machinery and a car and compare it with my experience with computers and smartphones, I would like to apologize to the old gentleman. Because I can understand now. But we used to go to Perry. We had a Buick touring car, an older model, of course, and the four of us, we learned to drive early, real early. My mother would take us out in this big pasture over here in the car, and we would learn to drive, and we were awfully young. But we would go to Perry, and our father would be driving, and we'd come down to the square down here at Perry, at the southeast corner. There was a stop sign, a light. And he would pull up to that light, and he'd reach down and get the emergency brake. We called it emergency brake. He'd pull it back, and it would kill the motor. He wouldn't release the clutch at all, just pull it back. It would kill the motor. He'd always say, "I wonder what makes this damn thing die." And we were in the back seat, and we were, of course, we knew all the functions of the clutch and the motor and the transmission and the differential, but he could never understand that he needed to release the clutch before he pulled back that brake. And that used to bother us quite a bit.
Dad tells the story of that first tractor.
Yeah.
Of him, their dad, starting out and driving the tractor, and then he couldn't make it stop. So he'd go, "Whoa, you son of a bitch!" That's in the book.
But one thing that all of that, learning all that early, when Daddy was in the Marines, and I can't quote it exactly, but when it came time to place you where you're supposed to be, he ended up being in the tank platoon, and he recruited all farm boys to be in his platoon with him because they could work on equipment. And they had they most of them made it through the war because they were able to keep their tanks in good shape and keep them running when they needed to. But it was a very intentional thing because he knew
He was the tank commander.
he was the tank commander in the Pacific, and I don't know. Did you work on tanks during the war?
I was in a tank.
So it was a good, safe place to be, apparently. Not safe, but
Not really. Anyway, Henry and I were both in the tank corps, and us old farm boys had one advantage. Back in those days, double clutching was a big thing. It was before synchronous transmissions, and we would take a lot of pride in the way we could shift these trucks. We could do it after you get started without using a clutch. Anyway, when I got in the Marine Corps and ended up in a tank outfit, went to the tank training center out near San Diego, a little crude camp by the name of Jack's Farm. And I went through the training, and the driving instructor, we lot of tank driving, and went to, when it come time to graduate, went through the line and graduated, and I was notified that I was being retained there as a driving instructor. I didn't ask for it, didn't want it, but that's the way it worked out. It's no big deal, that's the way they got the instructors. But we had, us old farm boys had the advantage, we could drive that tank, we could shift gears, you know, which was important. And most, I'd like to think we had a little common sense, and we knew where they'd go and where they wouldn't go. Some of these guys, and some of them couldn't even drive an automobile. You put them in a tank, well, you had a problem with them. But we did have an advantage in that. We knew how to double clutch. I was the driving instructor for only a few months. And I was kind of glad when I got out of there, but after I got out, I kind of wish I was back. It was pretty good duty.
Well, in the earlier days, it was easier to fix things than it is
Oh,
today.
yes.
Our very last wheat harvest, Dad, the year or two before Dad died, our cousin had worked for him for 25 years, and he decided to retire. So we were having our last wheat harvest, and you know, nowadays people have these beautiful combines, and they have these semis. Well, our combine was in 1984, and our two trucks that we used were 1970, 72, and 74. So to start harvest off, one of the trucks lost second gear. So we spent harvest going from first to third. And the combine was, we were just, you know, praying that we'd get through one last harvest. And it was always, you know, just keeping these machines going was a big job. And luckily our cousin was excellent at fixing machinery and figuring out what was going on. So finally, the last day, the last harvest, the auger broke, that it wouldn't shut off. So as you were going along getting the grain, it was augering it out onto the ground. So he had to disconnect the auger and go and do around and then come in and connect the auger and put it into the truck and then disconnect it and go around. So we were really thankful that we made it through that last harvest with the trucks and the tractor or the combine. But, we wouldn't have made it another year.
We never had fancy equipment. I can remember a pickup with an upside down bucket for a seat, which probably doesn't meet any sort of standards today.
But we did some years hire custom combiners. That was always interesting.
Although they couldn't cut for us on Sunday. They could cut for somebody else, but Daddy wouldn't let them cut wheat on Sunday.
Because when he tried to cut on Sundays, everything would break down. So it was a sign from God.
And his mother, probably, not to work on Sundays. That was a serious thing around here.
Let's talk a little bit about the farm today. What are you calling the place these days?
What do we call it?
Mhm.
The farm. We also have a retreat center operation here that's called Turtle Rock Farm, a center for sustainability, spirituality, and healing. So we do, the farm is still is a wheat and cattle farm, and is a young man who lives nearby, that does the farming and the ranching. And then on Dad's land, George's is different. And then the retreat center, Ann and I do that. People come here to do different kinds of retreats that we programmed retreats or their own kind of retreat. And we do help them have a chance to be on the prairie and be in nature and get to know it better and learn how to live more sustainably. Some of our retreats are workshops about gardening and composting and beekeeping and cooking in a way that's good for the earth, learning to live more simply. We do a lot of things that our grandmother did, like hang the clothes up on the lines and use all the chicken and alpaca poop for making the garden better. So actually gone back to some of the old ways, although it's not as hard as it was for them. We do have the advantage of modern things to help us do some of the things that were pretty smart back then.
Why the name Turtle Rock?
Well, Gail was talking about how the ponds curl up, the mud curls up when it dries. And this, millions of years ago, off and on was an ocean. And when the ocean mud would curl up, it would petrify. And so there are rocks on this piece of land, only here actually, not on other parts, not on the original homestead place, but that are white, and they're shaped like, there's one right there.
Oh,
They're
there you go.
they're shaped like a turtleback, and when you turn it over, it's actually the curled up petrified mudflat. And they're often fossils in there. So Dad called those turtle rocks. And when it came time to name the retreat operation, that's what we called it, Turtle Rock Farm.
They toyed with naming the farm Turtle Rock, but he just never could bring himself to give it a name. That was kind of fancy. So, but for this situation, it works out
And what do you see for the next 100 years?
Well, all of our children will come home and run the farm.
There you go.
without wind, right?
Well, we hope it, it's a good question. There are going to be issues here with water and productivity of the soil. So we have a lot of work to do, actually. And I think we should point out your operation now.
What's that?
How does your farm tip? Could you talk a little bit about how your farm, who runs it and who operates it?
Well, I retired. I don't know when I did retire,
Shortly after your three-wheeler accident.
but I leased my land out. I'm fortunate. I got a very fine tenant, and everything. I have no problems. And he's done a good job, and I'm very pleased. What else?
He has wheat and cattle, right?
Oh yes, he does. He farms quite a lot of land. Good farmer. I'm in the process of having some good luck and getting some oil production that I didn't anticipate. And this is going to be a break for me, I think.
George, another important part of my life was the day that you were putting the fuel incident in the tractor, filling the tractor. Would you tell that story?
I don't know what's your.
You got burned.
In
When-
the
When that
late
explosion?
60s.
When I got burned? Oh, I said, well, that happened in 1965, I guess it was. We burned propane in those days. Didn't burn diesel fuel. Or we didn't, some people might have. And I was working one night and came in to fuel up and had hooked the propane hoses on the fuel tank, and something ignited it. It exploded, and I was burnt pretty severely on the side of my head and arm and clear on down. And unfortunately, the tank that was burning was parked so close to the pickup that there was too much heat. I couldn't get to the pickup to get away, and had to stay there. And fortunately, a neighbor boy saw the lights from the flame and came over. He had to come about a mile and a half, picked me up and took me to the hospital. But that was,
A good neighbor.
yes, very good. D. Butchie that did that.
You had third-degree burns over quite a bit of your body.
Yes, I did. I was in the hospital for 3 weeks, I think. But I healed up pretty good, very good.
I think the question of what happens to the land for the next 100 years is something that maybe you could, as you talk to all these families, make information known to other farm families as how they're handling it through generations, because probably none of our children will come back to the farm at this point. It doesn't look like they may, but I don't.
Faith.
But I don't think you can count on it. So I think it would be interesting to hear how this is, being handled by lots of other families.
There's a wide variety, so.
But, I didn't know I was coming back. And so I think it's really hard to know what will happen down the road. I really have confidence that my kids will come back. I think it's really great that they go and in fact, there are people I know who made their kids leave for 10 years or something, because to just always stay here, to stay on the farm, then sometimes they wonder, what have I missed out on? What could I have experienced? So I think it's good for it to leave. And then as we say with ours, you value the land and you value the experience. So my kids did not grow up here. They grew up in the cities. But our kids would come back during the summers and help with wheat harvest. And even though they never lived here, they always considered this home. So I think there's just, when you've got that in your family, and even now when we have people come back for retreats, they say, oh, I'd forgotten. People our age, they've had that experience. And so it's really nice to reconnect with that and have a remembrance of their grandparents and those times that they got to spend on the farms.
And my son was born in the farm. We were living in the farmhouse when he was born, so he spent his first 5 years here. And the morning that we were moving, I slept in the upstairs bedroom, and you could see out across the prairie from that window. And Will woke up before I did and climbed the stairs and crawled into bed with me, and I said, well, Will, this is the last morning we'll look out there and see the prairie. He said, good, Mom. Because he just innately loves trees. He gets excited about trees. When we moved to Enid, he said, Mom, these sidewalks go all the way to Oklahoma City. He now lives in LA. But when he comes home, especially the last couple of years, he's now 24, he used to come home and go back to the Enid or Stillwater and stay with friends. Now they all mostly come here and spend their time jumping on hay bales and playing in the pond. So I think that internal knowing really pays off. It's in the blood, and being in nature is still central. And Elliot grew up in Enid, but he spent a lot of weekends here.
And
that's important.
he was, the only kid in his junior high that left early to go to tractor driving school, because he worked on the farm from about 7th or 8th grade on, and until college probably, and then was back and forth. And it's home to all of them, and it's so who knows what will happen? We don't know.
And here it is. It's April, and he's in Denver, and he's already planted zinnias. So
Yeah,
I mean,
he didn't quite get all the lessons done. Yeah, he is a huge gardener. He is a garden-raised person. So it is in their being, in their genes, or in their life experience. And there's a lot of connection. But our parents didn't expect us. They hoped that we would come back, but they didn't expect us to, and didn't force it upon us. And so I think that's sort of the legacy I pass on to my child, is having it available if he makes that choice. So I think you do kind of have to think about, what if he doesn't? I mean, ultimately it will be my land will be his land. And it will be his choice.
Is there anything else we need to cover that we haven't? Any last words from any of you?
There are a lot of great stories about the farm in the book. So I'm sure we've missed some, but it's laid
First
out
part of the book.
chronologically, so you can just, you don't have to read the whole book of Dad's book. But there are a lot of great stories about growing up.
Anything that's not in it that you want to share?
No, not. I think the parts he left out were politics stuff,
Okay.
not childhood stuff.
Well, has the neighbors changed much? The neighborhood itself, or?
Well, actually, the first family, when you come on CR90 across the road, that falling down brick place is the school, Glen Rose School. And then the first house on the right is, well, that was an interesting story. That house used to be a mile south of here. And as we were growing up, we watched them move that house, two-story house, to the first place after you turn on CR90. And there were two girls, children in that house, the Livingstons. And one of those girls is now living back in the old home place.
And they were the only people who had a storm cellar around. And Daddy hated going down into that cave. He just didn't like it. And so we would all pile in the car from the old house and drive up to Highway 15 and sit at that intersection by their house and watch the storm. And just before the tornado would hit, or whatever, the high winds, whatever was coming our way, he would throw it in reverse and we'd back up and pull into their driveway and dive into their storm cellar so that we had to spend as little time packed in. I don't know if there was claustrophobic or what, but he didn't like that at all. So we watched a lot of storms come across sitting in the car up at the highway.
And one night when we went home, their roof was in our yard, a mile and a half south. Yeah.
We cut that one a little close.
The other family, the next house was the Brinker family, and they don't live there anymore.
And the Rains had 3 boys, and
They're gone.
they're gone. There's not a house there.
So,
Odenwald.
Odenwald.
Yeah,
They-
their house burned down when we were kids, and he's actually married to, the son's married to the Livingstons. So the Odenwalds are still around.
And his brother's still here, Butch.
Yeah.
So, there are some families.
They're just, as my grandmother used to say, there just aren't as many houses as there used to be in the country. Because she could remember, especially, they lived west of here, more toward the Billings oil field, and there were a lot more houses when she was a child.
And I don't know why this came to mind, but that house, the original house, at some point, we had a porch on the south side. And our dad was always he would bring owl. We had a live owl that he brought into that porch, and snapping turtles. He was a consummate educator. I mean, he would go out in the pasture with him, and he would explain what the different prairie grasses, or I remember sensitive vine, and touching that and how it would curl up, and he would bring these animals in for us to see and to know which ones to avoid. And I remember specifically the owl grabbed onto his arm, and I'm not even sure how we got him off of his arm, but
I remember.
yeah, and the snapping turtle, showing us the stick and how the snapping turtle would grab it. So he was even I moved back 4 years before he died, and so I spent the last 4 years with him, again going around and him teaching us about the farm, which I'm very, very thankful for, because that's an education that you just can't get. But
He could catch baby jackrabbits. He'd bring them home. I don't know how.
yeah,
And then you get stunned with it.
Yeah, with a plow or something.
so. But just really, it's such an appreciation. I hope that we got some of that from Dad, because he just had such an appreciation of the land and what lived on it.
And he always wanted to come back from what I
Always.
read.
That's what kept him sane.
He always come back.
And even after our mom died, he remarried. But it was kind of funny because she lived in Kingfisher, and she had a farm, and she had 2 sons who farmed, and of course he had the farm here. So he would go back and forth, and he still spent a part of every week here, and he would never have considered not being able to come home, and was home until 2 days before he died. So.
Well, and when you ask about the future, when you talk about right before he died on a Tuesday morning. On Thursday of that week, he had a meeting in Oklahoma City that he had arranged, and Cherokee Street Transport took him down to talk about the 20th anniversary of House Bill 1017, which was kind of the major legislation passed during his last term. And that anniversary was last October, and they were talking about what they wanted to do kind of to commemorate that. And he said at the end of the meeting, we learned at his funeral, he looked around and said, you all have to figure out who's going to carry this on, because I'm not always going to be around. He comes back to Enid, had lunch at my house on Friday, spent the weekend with you, and George took him to the hospital on Sunday morning, and he died on Tuesday morning. So he was concerned about the future too, right to the end, and not just thinking about it, but acting on it. And hopefully that's another piece of the legacy that we'll all get, that will sustain the farm.
We're very grateful to be back here.
Well, we appreciate your time today. It's been great hearing the stories.
Thank you for asking.